Is there a way to?
You just want to pop that over for now, the like
I typically
line
have it on all
thingy.
the time.
Yes.
I mean, I always
I don't
have
know
it
what that's
on,
called.
but I
Kim.
always typically have it on.
That's better.
Twice a day, Drew. How lucky am I?
Okay, will you leave that there just for a minute? Absolutely. Okay.
Okay,
Are you recording?
we are gonna get started. Welcome to the January 16th Homeless Solutions Advisory Council. I am excited to see in person in our room, and also online, some of our new proposed council members. So thank you for being here. Kim, Rachel, Danielle, that's awesome. And then, current council members, it's great to see you as well. Thank you for being here. We do have quorum, which is fantastic. So we are going to jump into our agenda and move right on to public comment. Don't see, well, I guess potential new council members, this could be a time for you to speak if you so choose. If you wanted to say anything, this is an opportunity in the room or online. Not seeing anything, I think we'll go ahead and continue through our agenda. Thank you so much. We are going to dive right in, you guys. Everybody received the memo from Nicole last night. Our agenda went out a few days ago. And we're gonna do an update about do some budget discussions. I will hand it over to Nicole.
Great, and Chair, I might request a brief agenda modification. We're waiting for Jess Larson to wrap up a meeting upstairs before she heads downstairs. But I am your person on the potential referral measure. So
Great.
If you're amenable, happy to
Yep.
change the agenda a bit.
We're gonna jump forward on an agenda item and then come back.
Great, all right, well, and Sharon, I hate to say this, but I think you might know more than me on this topic, so I'll give a brief update and then would love to hear updates from others as we get there. The first update is we have a proposal from Metro. This has been a long-standing discussion we've had as a Solutions Council for quite some time. And actually, just as I'm speaking, Mayor, I just noticed Adam is in the waiting room, one of our new members as well. So just for the new members that might not be tracking this as closely, Metro has been considering a referral to the SHS measure kind of in earnest since October, but really the conversation began as a way to think about funding for affordable housing over a year ago. But we're at the moment now where we have words on paper and lots of scribbles from me on reactions on what could be a proposed ballot measure and a complementary ordinance. So this is all online. What I'll uplift is there's a lot of consternation from members of the community about what's been proposed and what's been brought forward. I'll uplift that our own commission is feeling like this is too soon, that we don't know enough about what would happen with what's proposed for us to move forward. We are hearing similar statements from the Multnomah County Commission that has put out a letter requesting Metro hold on referring a measure until we're able to get on the same page. And as of last night, the Metro mayors who work together in the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium have put forward a letter asking Metro to wait as well. So we're in we continue to be in a moment of unknowns. There's a lot of conversation happening with members of the community. And I might invite in our chair to describe some of those conversations. For those of you that were in the room early, there was a meeting with the Tiger Chamber happening with President Peterson and our own Chair Harrington.
Oh, sure. So I sit on the Government Affairs and Public Policy through the Tiger Chamber of Commerce because I have nothing better to do with my time. And we invited both Chair Harrington and Council President Peterson to come and speak. It was a very tight timeline because the meeting is only an hour. And what the feedback I heard from the committee, who has two Tiger City Council members, and then TVF&R is represented, Downtown Tiger Alliance. I'm one of the CBOs, was the inconsistencies and contention between the two entities. So pretty consistent with what we've been seeing recently. I can say at Metro's meeting this morning, one of the big shifts is that they moved the first reading from next week, the 23rd to the 30th, because enough of the council members felt it was important to continue their conversation. There was a sense of at least this was the first time they're actually speaking, so it was good to hear from them. But a sense of a few of the Metro Council members aren't ready to move forward with this. So they wanted some more time to think and adjust and discuss. And so utilizing next week's meeting to continue their conversation. So I felt a little hopeful with that. Chair Harrington had started to read through the proposed ordinance and also had many scribbles and conversation pieces. So we'll hear more about that as it continues. Encourage you to listen in on those meetings. You can show up via virtually and speak during public comment virtually if you can't be there in person, but it is a great way to continue to be in the know and utilize your voice. This morning, Home Plate, Family Promise to Tualatin Valley, and Project Homeless Connect spoke during public comment. That's it. Jess Larson is here. We just switched really quick because we could get through that quickly, but we are looking forward to this budget. It's not the right wording. We're glad you're here and we're gonna have a budget discussion,
We can still look forward to the conversation.
right?
It's okay.
Thank you, and I am looking forward to the discussion. It's hard,
I actually,
but it's substantive, it's meaningful. We're asking ourselves big questions. We're trying to get better at building and implementing this system. And budgets are values-based documents, so it's this opportunity for us to do that hard work. And yes, it's hard to reduce a budget from 115 million to $100 million. That is really, really hard. And the staff have been doing hard work over the last month, especially the last week, to figure out how could this be best done. And I'm proud and grateful of their work. There are some constructive, draft concepts here that we're gonna walk through, and I think it is evidence of holding those values and making the best possible decisions that we must necessarily make. So thanks for having me. Thank you for pivoting the agenda. I'm so sorry about
not a problem.
my tardiness.
Can I also want to, such a level of appreciation for the hard work and reviewing it. Just really appreciate clearly hearing from us, taking into consideration some of the things that have been said at these meetings and then others as well. And to your point, Jess, that's a huge reduction and you didn't go to 100. You guys are not just doing a huge cut right away. It's a little bit tiered to try to minimize the impact, which is really, really appreciated.
Thank you for that. So if you haven't had a chance to get into the materials, and that's fully understandable because I think they were just sent. We recognize it's gonna take time to absorb, but what Kim is speaking to is that the budget for SHS services, and that's mainly SHS funded services, and that's mainly what we're discussing because that's mainly where the reduction is being felt, and it's 90% of our resource for the homeless services. But the total budget we will put forward is looking like in this draft version would be about $107 million. So that's $7 million more than the current revenue forecast indicates. And the reason we can do that is we can balance it with one-time carryover funds. We are working to create a transition fund fund guidance or policy that would be resourced with a variety of carryover components. Our carryover balance includes some reserves. It also includes uncommitted one-time resources. It also includes committed one-time resources, and the uncommitted or unassigned even resources from the Regional Investment Fund. So we are proposing a combination of those tools that would then become a transition fund that we will likely need to cover over expenditures this year, now that we know we're not gonna likely get the 115 million we budgeted for this year, and ramping down next year so we can mindfully pay for staff positions through the transition, or households who are currently housed who need to continue on their rapid rehousing program until their time is out, so we can transition mindfully, and likely additional transition resources needed in this next program year 6. But certainly in program year 6 and 7, if there are further reductions from Metro's measure. So I do want to stress that we actually designed the agenda the way it was, not the way it's gone, on purpose, because we wanted to say this is our reality today. What Metro is proposing could change that would change that reality in years 6 and 7 and beyond. But what we're proposing here today is the reality based on the revenue forecast. It has nothing to do with that proposed measure, and so it's necessary. Thank you, Nicole, for keeping me on topic here. So you're here as our solutions council. I know some of you are also here as contracted service providers. You're wearing both hats necessarily. So you're looking at some of these proposals and immediately translating in that into what it would mean for your programs, your staff, what you're doing today. I understand that, and I'm not asking you to take both hats off, but I am asking us to think about the guidance and the conversation at that system level. We haven't yet, as staff, made any decisions about how these reductions would then roll into specific contracts. That work has not begun. What we've looked at is the system need, the system performance, the commitments that we've made to voters, all the various population needs, what's coming online and hasn't yet come online. Those are the information points, not performance of specific providers or specific FTE positions that are empty or anything like that. So that's the next step when budget turns into contract determination. And that has not yet been considered and is not actually the purpose of our discussion here. So I wanted to clarify that we're thinking about our systems needs and how to best balance out our investments to achieve all those goals, keeping the focus on housing and ensuring an adequate system to respond to our community, the emergency of unsheltered homelessness. The AEB percentage, right? So that's an obligation, the commitment to voters around PSH and shelter beds. So those are the things we're considering and we're asking for your guidance as our advisory body. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, is that who's facilitating?
Nadia. has
Oh,
slides from
thanks,
home.
I'll speak up, Nadia. So I think we talked about all of this. This is just where we've gone on this journey together. We saw this coming in October when we realized we didn't receive as much revenue last year in program year 3 as had been forecasted. It was only of a difference of about 3 million. Now that difference is forecasted to be 15 million, but we've been slowly preparing. I want to shout out to our partners here in the room who have programs that have already begun to plan for reductions in our motel shelter, temporary market-based or scattered site shelters that are in motels, and also our eviction prevention programs. That work had started earlier. We started having those values-based discussions with you here. Then the forecast came and the reality became harsher and more real and more urgent. And so that's why December has been hard and very focused on preparing these recommendations for your consideration. Next slide, Nadia. These guiding principles still hold. Some of them I've spoken to. Certainly making sure that our reductions were mindful of how they may have impacts to our performance in advancing equity in our community. We don't want to have disproportionate impact on communities of color who've already experienced disproportionate and continue to experience disproportionate impact of an unjust housing system. And then the balance, I talked to some of that. So these are old, you've seen them before, they continue to guide us. Next slide. So we're gonna go program area by program area, and in the menu or the outline that Nicole and team prepared for you, you see, oh, and the color coordination. Oh my goodness, you think of everything, it's amazing. So we're gonna start with access and outreach. This is often the front door of our system, so it makes sense we start there. The current draft budget has this area of work budgeted at $6.21 million. What this would do would be proposing a system that had 16 outreach workers across the county, 2 access centers online, 1 permanent, because Just Compassion is opening its new building shortly, which will include expanded shelter and the new access center. But also, we expect to fund a temporary sort of partial access center contract for the future Hillsborough Access Center that will be created through PHC's work. And then it says 14 to 18, but right now the draft budget entertains actually 18 liaisons. So what that means is a reduction of 3 outreach workers, an expansion of access programs, access center programs specifically, and a reduction of 4 liaisons. And another area of reduction in the access and outreach programs is how we're calculating flex funds. This is something we've been spending a lot of time evaluating. Many of these programs have launched kind of along the way over the last 4 years, and we haven't had a systematized plan about how flex funds are structured. So we're gonna work in our programs going forward that all participant assistance funds are budgeted on a per worker basis, depending on that worker's scope of services. So outreach workers have a slightly different scope of services than housing liaison workers, than retention workers, but the budget for anticipating those potential expenses are on a per worker basis. It used to be sometimes household, sometimes worker, so we're gonna standardize that. And also we're gonna take out of that bucket of funding the move-in costs. So the move-in costs are separate because really those are much more substantial costs. And also they have to do with where we're at in our system and how much capacity we have to fill. Over the last 3 years, we've been basically filling empty capacity. Going forward, we're gonna be mostly filling capacity through attrition. So how workers can plan for the use of their funds shouldn't be so lopsided based on how many households they're placing. So we're gonna pull the placement funds, the deposit assistance, if you will, because that's really a lot of money out from that flex fund budget. What we are gonna add to that flex fund budget though is something that has been developed as short-term solutions. It's actually not really adding because it's already in there, but through further evaluation, really these participant assistance funds are meant to be responsive to the needs that that worker, or the tools that worker has to provide supportive interventions for the individual they're working with. And short-term solutions are sort of medium, if anyone wants to try to correct me here, but how I understand them is they're resources that help sort of mitigate someone's homelessness shy of an actual housing placement. So those resources we're just gonna blend with those participant assistance funds. So here in access programs right now, the draft budget proposes $15,000 per worker flex fund or participant assistant fund for outreach workers and $25,000 for liaisons.
What kind of feedback do you want? Do you want to do it by program? How do you break it out? You've received my email. Do you not want me to talk here and you guys will? That was a shocking question, I realized.
No, I haven't, I haven't read your email,
Oh.
sorry.
Well, Jess, it's long. So I guess my bigger question is, do you want us to wait till the end or do you want to go?
Well, you're the facilitator, I'm mindful of time.
Yeah.
So we have, so that was one section and we have 5, I think, right? 1, 2, 3, we have, I don't know, maybe we have more than that, we have 6 or 7. So what makes sense? Should we push through with the content and then have questions? Or going one at a time? Any requests from members of the committee?
I think it's good to push through the content.
Great.
Just to, I can keep notes as to like,
Perfect.
go back to that green section, we have questions.
Let's keep going.
The other thing, go ahead, Stacy.
No, I was just gonna say keep going. So thanks.
Yeah, everybody looks frozen.
Oh.
She did.
She is frozen.
Sorry, am I frozen? I was just saying keep going. We're
Morning's good.
fine. Keep going.
Oh, gosh.
We're not frozen.
We're,
I just want that to go with you. Hey, Kinsley, my daughter, go look at the camera. I'll be doing a dance in the back. It's a recorded.
Jess,
meeting.
maybe we keep going and we can come back to Stacy.
Well, I wanna make sure they can hear.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're like all frozen.
I'm hearing just fine.
Oh, have they? I didn't even notice.
Sorry, I did notice.
Have we
it a
gotten any
minute ago.
notes from them?
no, but my computer here does not show the same screen as here.
Doesn't seem to be any chats in the chat.
Oh, they can hear.
Oh,
Okay.
great.
As long
Keep
as they're
going,
here.
keep going.
Okay,
keep going.
thanks.
Okay, thanks all.
I'll still do my dance.
Um, So there's a slide, oh, I'm gonna actually, yep, okay, push through. In emergency shelters, I just wanna say pretty straightforward, we're not reducing shelter capacity. We're in some ways expanding shelter capacity next year, with the exception of the shelter capacity that we're already planning to reduce. So it is a bit of a win to not have to reduce it further with this draft budget. What it does do is though, you all may know that we have 90 pods we acquired through the wonderful, generous support of the governor's EO. We only have 60 in operation right now because one of the sites is being turned into a permanent shelter. We don't have plans to be able to afford, we don't even have a location for those current 30 that are in storage. So right now the budget is based on those just 60 being in operation. If you're paying along to in this level, some of you all know that those two sites in Cornelius and Aloha have to come offline this year because they are at their 2-year max. The budget does plan for the ability to continue funding that capacity, presuming we're gonna find another location. So we hope to sustain all the shelter capacity. And in fact, we're adding some shelter capacity because when Just Compassion opens their site in Tigard, that total shelter capacity will go from 20 to 60 shelter beds. The budget, this slide is just speaking to the emergency shelters. There were some tinkering with the number of inclement weather nights that we budget for to help us kind of save some funds that we don't think we need to set aside for that purpose, but still to make sure we can afford inclement weather, because it does happen any time of year, and everyone should know we're likely to activate this weekend because it's quite cold, as we all can tell. The big shift, and this applies both for emergency shelters and the alternative shelters, the next slide, is that we are working to standardize our day rate approach. Right now, we have basically every shelter has a different day rate based on the different unique needs of that shelter. And as we have more permanent shelters online, and we've learned so much over the first 3 years of implementing shelter programs, we can standardize day rates to $85 a day for congregate settings and $96 a day for non-congregate settings. And then set aside in each contract and in our budget the unique facility costs for some of those shelters. Like if you know about the pod shelters, we have to rent a shelter truck for $7,000 a month. And that's a very exorbitant expense. It's partly why pod shelters are a temporary emergency response and not a long-term sustainably affordable. Well, not in the model we're doing pods right now anyway. So long-term, we might want to build a shower building if we were going to have pods, but this is what we have right now. So we'll have to pay for that, but we're not rolling that into a day rate. So we can monitor these expenses and make sure the day rate is paying for the operations of the program and the daily maintenance, but not these kind of site-specific costs. That will help us achieve some savings in our overall shelter budget. I'm gonna push through and maybe not highlight every detail in the content. In alternative shelters, the big changes here that haven't been mentioned so far, again, sustaining all of those Project Turnkey programs that are already online, not reducing those, keeping the 60 BHADs in operation, standardizing rates. So I've spoken to all of this. The only thing is to add that we don't think the LATS program, we know the LATS program is amazing and necessary. We would in fact like to expand it. We don't think we can rely on the Supportive Housing Services measure to fully fund it going forward. It's meant to be a demonstration pilot that earns us the partnership of a health system funder to partially pay for that program because we're serving people who are coming out of the hospital system. So we're gonna put the staff on kind of a high order to help us go identify funding to stably fund that program long-term. But we will fund it for 1 more year for SHS. And then there's no transitional housing yet, but this is here because it's an important placeholder that it's about a $2 to $3 million budget that we'll need to anticipate when the 119 transitional housing program or units join our system. I'm gonna keep going. I'm hoping you're having lots of good questions, but to keep my presentation shorter and get your conversation longer, pushing through to permanent housing. This is where there's a lot. Permanent housing is the most that we do. Look at that giant $74 million budget. Oh, I missed something.
Short-term solutions.
Sorry, hold that thought. Back to short-term solutions. If you're tracking the changes in budget, one of some of this is just us figuring out how we add our programs together. So there's a note that the liaisons has been moved up to the access and outreach category. So we already talked about that. The big change here is that this includes a vision for a flex fund that is responsive to those emergency housing needs, both those all those move-in costs. And I actually don't know that 200 number I think is old. Nicole, let's run that back and check that again. I think we'll exceed that 200 number in the memo. And eviction prevention. We're not going to be able to sustain eviction prevention resources the way we did through the one-time carryover funds that we had in the first couple of years. Big shout out to Centro and Community Action for their work in implementing that program. We just don't have that level of resource. It was basically mostly sustaining COVID era funding. But we do need some level of eviction prevention, and that is what's entertained here in the budget. I think it's 2.5 million specifically that we're looking at, but really what this is meant to be is a responsive funding pool that is available to all the providers in the system to be able to keep someone who used to be homeless housed, or to move someone who is homeless into housing. We don't have this program yet. We need to build it. We need a tool that is being responsive to preventing and ending homelessness for those folks who have come through our system. All right, next on to permanent housing, which does include PSH programs and also rapid rehousing programs. And both will be seeing reductions. I want to say that this is the area where we're struggling, or it's in some ways the hardest part of this budget. There's reason behind it, and I will walk you through that why, or the whys behind these recommendations. So first, you've been hearing us talk about reducing rapid rehousing. We've made some changes to rapid rehousing, so it is focused on as a population B program, which is good because that makes better sense. What rapid rehousing is up to a 2-year support housing assistance program. And when we know so many people who have been chronically or are chronically homeless, they need much longer support. We're setting people up for like a 2-year cliff. And so we're going to stop doing that. But because we need to right size our Pop A, Pop B investments in our system, we need to bring that budget down. So 90 slots of rapid rehousing are recommended to be removed from our current capacity, which would bring us down to about 540 slots. Doesn't include the COC slots. So we're just not, if you're tracking the whole system, COC is still there and unaffected. It's pretty stable funding so far. Let's all knock on wood together. So the reductions would be in the, it's what we call enhanced rapid rehousing program. Also, you've heard some themes of this earlier, but even as we're facing reductions, we do have to increase our budget for some things because y'all are housing people. My team told me today that we have 1,750 households housed right now.
Amazing.
1,750 households housed because of SHS resources in rapid rehousing or HCMS. And so every time we house a new household in a new slot, we have to sustain that rent assistance. So the cost of ARLA is our biggest budget investment, which tells us our values are aligned with the intent of voters. And I think the wisdom of our community. But we have to increase the budget for Arla next year because we'll have more people housed that we need to sustain. HCMS, I think I might be I'm following this and not going in order of this. Oh, it's the same. HCMS, thank you, Nicole, is another place where we're really struggling, and I'm just gonna own this as my kind of executive, if you would, recommendation, and here's why. We had opportunity with additional resources in the early years to overshoot our goal. And before we fill up those slots that have not been yet filled, because this is a permanent program and we don't know our permanent future yet, I am concerned about overhousing very vulnerable, it's not overhousing, but overcommitting our system to house more very vulnerable people who need permanent assistance if we are going to have to reduce that. So before we fill the remaining slots, I'm recommending we reduce some HCMS capacity. It's worth noting that the total PSH commitment that we would have funded in this draft budget is 1640 plus 84, because we have 84 permanent supportive housing slots in our system through the Heartwood and the Viewfinder. So that is over our commitment still. Can't do that math so fast, but I think it's over 1700 and our commitment is to 1665. But I'm just not committed. I just don't feel comfortable going even further when we might see further reductions ahead. So before we fill that capacity, I'd like to see us take it off to be more conservative and measured with our resources. And then last, a new recommendation that flex funds the 12,500 per retention worker, per worker in HCMS and rapid rehousing. Again, setting aside those move-in funds, but reducing them slightly because we're not in a time of abundance. People are going to need to use other resources to be responsive to our participant needs. I'm pushing through, y'all. I'm sorry. System support here. We're gonna move into next slide, Nadia, please. The most significant reduction here that will be felt across our system is the wonderful creation of the data quality assurance program that helped our providers learn how to do the complex data that needs to get done in order to reflect the work correctly in HCMS, HMIS, pardon me. We can't continue to fund that on a per organizational basis. So it's 1 FTE per organization. The data team has recommended through evaluation of how that's working that in some cases, some organizations are small enough in their scope of services that it should be a percentage, like a 0.25 FTE. And in other organizations where they're doing a robust body of work through the SHS program, it would still be an FTE. So this is an overall reduction of about 75% of that program. And it will kind of get rolled out over time. We're also recommending, we've actually been indicating we thought we would have to end the Housing Careers Program. We think there's value in keeping it and pairing it more tightly with the Rapid Rehousing Program. Again, we're gonna focus those POP B households on getting into independence. So let's give them those tools to get jobs when that's the part of the housing plan. So we're gonna keep the program, but narrow its scope to the coaching services is what's currently recommended. And then this is another example, reducing the furniture to 400 households. That's actually a natural, like as we move into attrition, there's some places where we're seeing some cost savings because we're just not housing as many households. So we get to see, and unfortunately, that's part of the reality here is we're gonna be sustaining more housing than we are gonna be creating new housing. But that's because we have 1,750 households in housing through these programs. The next slide, really pushing through, y'all. I want to get to the end of my talking points for you. The county operations and admin slide describes further reductions on our part. We are budgeting for about 5 or 6 fewer positions in our homeless services system here in our work here in the county. I've also asked my supervisors to take account of all of their consultant services. We can't rely on the consultants who've helped us build up this work. We need to shrink that work. And so as the partners are taking impacts, the county is taking those impacts too. See, the slides has not advanced, we might be stuck. Okay, thanks Nadia. That was that slide, and then the last slide, or maybe there's one or two more.
Jess, can I elevate just one thing?
Yes,
Because
please.
I wanna just underscore, the staff reductions is a staff reductions of around 12% for our department. So I just wanna uplift the feedback we received from you all to tighten our belts as much as possible and wanna own that we're doing the tightening and we're doing it through attrition and not layoffs.
So here's that whole recommended draft system funded with SHS resources, 107.26 million. Just under 7 million, which will have to come through one-time transition fund support to balance our budget. There are a couple more points I want to make that I haven't made yet. The next slide talks about some of the mitigation tools that are sort of built into this budget. We have estimated for time for staffing reductions to get made. It's not super generous, I want to be clear, but it's what we thought was necessary. And it's going to take work on our part and work with our partners to make it possible. So the budget presumes that for all positions that we're reducing, we would provide 3 months of full salary and benefits and just the cost for the program operations for 3 months. And then for positions where that are being reduced, where there's a caseload, we would fund 6 months to support that transition. Our goal is to be able to communicate this out to all of our partners who are facing those reductions 3 months before the contract is executed. So that would give 6 months or 9 months for that transitioning work to happen, to be funded through the contract. So that is built into this draft budget here to help us with the transition. It's part of why we need those transition resources to help us pay for this system reduction mindfully. We have a staff person who is really excellent in supporting us as in HR. If you haven't met Kat Watkins, I look forward to introducing you to her. And she'd like to extend, and we'll make this offer directly to the impacted organizations. We'll extend her services to support the challenges, the difficulties of making staff reductions and how to communicate, how to support, how to connect those staff to opportunities if they aren't able to be made through the organization's own transitions or attrition, if you will. And then now more than ever is the importance of figuring out how to integrate Medicaid funding to fill gaps and find new resources. And of course, OHCS, you all know the governor's got a very bold budget proposed for this fiscal year, this next biennium. The state legislature session will be kicking off, I think, next month. That won't be resolved until June, but we need to fight hard for those resources there because they will impact our ability to transition this work and sustain our system long term. All right, I think that's it. Now we're ready for all your thoughts and questions, but also recommendations, feedback. We want to hear, these are the questions. We want to hear where your concerns are, where we might not be aligned with those principles and the intent of this programmatic work from your perspectives. And if you have any suggestions on where else we could reduce resources to fill any, if not this, then what else, essentially.
Okay. Council, the floor is open. Does anybody have questions, comments that you would like to speak to? Stacy, if you're working, we might be able to hear you now. Yep.
Can you
Please
hear
go
me?
ahead, Stacy.
All right, awesome. Thanks. Thanks, Jess, for walking us through all that, and thanks for the memos and all the work that it's taken to get us to where we are right now. I'm glad to see that there's some,
We thought we saw you talking, but we're not hearing you.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
I'm gonna just try to.
We're hearing okay here in the meeting, so it's probably the audio there.
Okay, thank you, Zoe.
And type it just so they
Okay.
can all hear it. You can take somebody else.
We got
Hear it
you.
now.
We can hear you now.
But you finally gave up.
We just had you. Try again.
You can hear me now. Sorry, this is like chaos today. Hopefully you're hearing me right now. I was just gonna say,
Yes.
you know, thanks for all the work. And, you know, it's such a big system with so many different service providers and all that. I like all the different thoughtful ways that, you know, reductions have gone in. I'm glad you could save some of the pieces that look like they might not have been saved. And, you know, people will experience attrition and change just based on the kind of, you know, shock to the system that this is a little bit. As you've staffed up now, it's kind of, there's some reductions. And so I'd just like to make sure that there's a message that says something like, you know, transition periods are needed for, you know, client support and are really, you know, trying to help focus on clients. And I'd love to see if, when there's the opportunity, people don't have to necessarily respect that per worker cap if they happen to be in a situation where they have a little bit more resource that can go to customers or to clients, whatever you guys call them. Because you're kind of messaging, we're going to have to do a little bit less and we're going to constrict these flexible funds. And I think that flexible fund piece is so important. So that's all I was just going to flag. Kind of, it all makes sense. It sounds logical, the ways you're trying to kind of proportionally squeeze the system down a little bit to fit the resources. But also, I'd like to make sure the message comes through that it is still important to keep the decisions closest to the folks that you're trying to serve, and having flex funds, not just capped. If there are resources, then it feels like that would be helpful to staff. It's a small point, so sorry. Thanks for hearing that.
Stacy, I don't think that that's a small point at all. It's a really important point. We hear pretty directly about the anxiety and concerns about impacts of reductions to our providers. And I think we're used to communicating that, but we need to also really be mindful in communicating that these decisions are all about how we create the community impact of serving people in our community who need supports to get stably housed. And that is fundamentally our first and foremost why of this work and how these decisions are being made. So yes, the flex funds to support our participants are critical in being able to respond to those in crisis outside, but also keep those in housing stably housed. We'll work on communicating that and bringing that forward in our messaging. Thank you.
Thinking about, you know, like sustainability of staff and our workforce, will layoffs or potential like loss of FTE coincide with like shrinkage of capacity? Meaning that like if we're losing an FTE, we're not also going to be expected to continue to serve the same amount of households?
Thanks. It's an excellent question. We're not asking our partners, we're not expecting our system to do more with less. It's just not possible. We can't do good care to the people we're serving. So this is all, the math is based on slot reduction, capacity reduction when it comes to the housing programs, rapid rehousing, well, eviction prevention. We just won't have as many eviction preventions. And HCMS. With the outreach though, there will be kind of on whole less outreach, but the expectation is still coverage of the whole county, right. You know, so I wanted to, that's a different example. You know, liaisons will, with the reduction there, I think that's 4 positions. The staff will have to come forward recommending where in our system it makes sense for those reductions to be made, because it's not as critical to have 2 positions at that location or be at this other location. Those are some decisions that will have to get made. So as a whole, it means doing less with less, right, when it comes to the number of FTE positions.
Vernon has a question online. Vernon, please go ahead.
Yes, hello, everyone. A couple of questions. One, regarding the outreach. I'm just hoping that we take in consideration that it's going to be tremendously important to make sure that each organizations that are doing outreach, that they have at least 2 so that people are working by themselves and have no support, because that was one of the things that was that we went through when we first started back in 2021, and not having that. So that's really, really important. And then secondly, as relates to the shelter capacity is not changing. That's great, but I heard you say we're not expecting to be to do the same with less. But if we're capping our daily rate in such a way till it's going to force to reduce staffing costs, we will be in essence we are being asked to do more with less, which is a concern just for safety and best practices and those kinds of things.
Vernon, thank you. Excellent points in both regards. Yes, teams of two and outreach is programmatic best practice, also just safety requirements, and we need to make sure we're funding a system that can sustain that, and that will be the work of the staff to turn these reductions into ensuring teams of two, essentially. And I appreciate you calling me out on, I said not less with less, but that is not true in the case of the shelter reductions. You're exactly right. That is the one area where, so I think it feels challenging to talk about reducing capacity, both with staffing and housing capacity in those other housing programs. The shelter reductions feel challenging in a different way. We need some more technical rigor to better understand the actual costs of operating our shelters. The early analysis we've done so far is that there is room in those budgets to make some reductions in those rates. Again, it's not necessarily across the board, it's a standardizing of the rate. We're seeing certain shelters operate with this much money and different shelters operate with different amounts of money. So standardizing that. And the analysis we've been able to do with the reports from our shelter providers about their expenses that we've gathered indicates that there is capacity in those budgets to absorb these reductions, but there will be further technical work to test those assumptions needed to be done. That'll be kind of one of the next steps with staff. We'll be asking, in order to separate out the daily operations, the day rate, from site-specific facility costs like shower trucks, we need to gather that data from the shelter operations of operators about what are their site-specific operation costs to be able to refine those budgets. So thank you for calling that out. We are aware of it. We certainly need to staff overnight or whatever is the right ratio of overnight staff at our shelters. We need to sustain adequate staffing coverage generally in our shelters for that safety and also the service of our community members. So the goal of standardizing shelter rates is not to ask providers to do more with less. It's to find a more efficient way to deliver services across the board in our shelter systems. And we'll have to learn if that's viable.
If this proposed budget goes forward, when will we start to see like the impacts of not filling households that move on for whatever reason?
Thank you. Question, like when does capacity start to make an impact in our planning? Probably pretty soon. We don't want to scale up and then scale up through the rest of the year and then scale down. So we already know that we're going to have to adjust our year 4 work plan goals, the goals we set for right now, because if we're anticipating reducing capacity and rapid rehousing, we wouldn't be racing to house all of those people this year and then have to shrink that capacity. So this is all forecasting, slack forecasting that the data team needs to do in coordination and partnership with the staff doing the work. But we would probably start to make those adjustments this spring. I'm guessing right around the time we're making those plans for the contracts, we're also starting to shift our referral capacity strategy rather than waiting for the new fiscal year.
Is there any way to say like to put a number value on how much each program may lose capacity? Did that question make sense?
Well,
how many slots a program may lose each, throughout the, I mean, I see 90, right, but like,
and was there a number of workers there too? That was slots.
Yeah, Drew,
What are you looking at, Drew?
could I ask a clarifying question? Are you asking
sure.
like when you'll know for each organization, how much that organization's capacity is
Correct.
increasing? Do you want me to?
Sure, go ahead.
Right, so that is kind of phase 2 of the process. We have to put together these high level budget categories. We have very strict deadlines to meet the county's budget process, and then we do the work. We'll come back to you to get some advice on kind of the values and principles and considerations we do in this work, but staff will take the high level budget categories and turn them into contractual commitments, and we're aiming to have those to partners in April.
just imagining like a household graduating or a slot being opened up and then hearing, that's not gonna be filled. But so, yeah, just all those things going through my brain.
Cause I have a whole bunch.
I know, can you give me an example of flex funds? Someone,
The hardest or the easiest?
no, I don't really care, but I mean, what I'm like,
What they're
I
used
don't
for.
have flex funds. My budget does not require or have
So,
flex, there's no
right,
flex in my
yeah.
budget. I'm asking what they are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one thing that I would speak to on the first category, access and outreach, is the reduction of flex funds for outreach. And so that could be a multitude of things, but it's in terms of outreach, it's usually basic needs, if it's supplies or water, a little bit of food, those types of things fall under flex funds. I would say again, under that same category, one of the things here, in the reducing of the housing liaison program, there's a reduction of flex funds being put there. I probably, from my perspective, and I'm really trying to stay in my chair role versus my ED role here, there's more room based on our experience to reduce flex funds in that program, because there's still some buildup there. We need to get that program a little more built, a little bit more understood, but I think for next year, there's a little give there as we figure it out and understand better what short-term solutions is gonna look like in those types of things.
So like, for example, if I am a worker, my job being in access and outreach, I'm an outreach worker in the community hired by one of these contract workers. I work, but I have to maintain a budget of $15,000 for the year to be able to, on my own, it's flexible, buy water for my client or buy popcorn or TriMet tickets, or is that?
May I, this is just our budgeting calculation.
No, I get
So-
that.
So hopefully PHC's, they buy a bunch of bus tickets for all their
Yeah.
outreach workers, but yes, it's participant assistance.
Right.
Is technically what this is, so it has to be
Okay.
for the purposes of the participant,
Yeah,
not other flex funds in the contract. And it's how we've budgeted an estimate that the organization can use for all the flex funds that they can, so it's not limited per worker, it's an estimate to do
Right.
all of the work of outreach that the organization does.
Interesting. Okay, I had to process.
The harder one, and it comes up in the memo at one point, is flex funds connected to participant assistant or flex funds, same thing, with HCMS and our ARLA vouchers being utilized for utility payments to keep someone housed.
Okay,
That's a big one that lots of conversations are being had around that, both internally, like at Project Homeless Connect, and then I know we've been talking with the county as well, and it's already on the radar, it's been on the radar, to try to understand better how we shift that, because that is a huge use of funds right now. So I just spoke into outreach, and again, I'm gonna say it, I went into this anticipating these, and I actually left it last night. I sent a lengthy email, but I left it going, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. There was some anxiety, and it's really diminished because of your hard work and listening to us and not just cutting. So thank you for that. But I do see housing liaison flex funds as a potential another reduction that could be made. Not talking huge dollars there, but it is something. Emergency shelters. I'm just going in order of, I'm gonna echo Vernon's concerns around what that's gonna look like. I understand standardizing the rate and what that could look like, but it sounds like you're gonna get more information and understand better exactly what it does cost, particularly to have appropriate staffing for safety and those types of things. So thanks for bringing that up, Vernon. One of the things on with emergency shelters is the reduction of anticipated nights of inclement weather. And part of this, you guys, I'm speaking just to give you some more education, because I know not everyone's as deep into this as maybe PHC is or Kim is. Absolutely, we can do a reduction of anticipated nights of inclement weather. We inflated it a little bit, we being whoever, and there is an easy a way to bring that down and have some cost savings there without hurting much. Again, not millions of dollars, but at least something. I do have a question under alternative shelters. In the emergency shelters, we discontinued the temporary motel shelter, which is affecting this program year and then discontinued for next program year. But there you have listed the 150 motel shelters for families and medically needy. Is that new? Or is that a continuation? Is that, yeah, I would love a little more information about that.
I think that adds up to all 3 Project Turnkey sites.
Thank you.
So it's a continuation, not new.
Okay. I think that was one of the things I asked you guys, and you said this too, Project Turnkey isn't mentioned here. So just connecting that to Project Turnkey would just connect the dots for folks. Transitional housing, my only question around that is no investments this coming fiscal year, so no reductions, but then where is the funding for it gonna come from in the following year? This is a priority for us, is moving towards that transitional housing, such a huge need, and we've talked about that, but just under, then what? Short-term solutions, we knew this was coming, this is probably the biggest hit, right? In terms of year over year from this year's budget to next year's proposed budget. Based on the numbers I have. So I guess my point is we're gonna feel it. Permanent housing, Jess, I agree with literally everything you said in your presentation, and it is hard.
Write that down, please.
Right, somebody.
With everything Jess said.
Yes, I am going to repeat that. I agreed with everything just said in that piece of this. In terms of slow roll, taking a little pause on it, really understanding where we're at potentially with other potential reductions, so that we're not, Drew's still laughing, moving people in and then having to figure out some other things. One of my questions in a previous meeting, and it's still a question that I have, particularly as we're talking about reductions and stuff, is that what's working, what's not working. We've talked about rapid rehousing and some of the challenges with that. So we feel like that's an area that can be reduced. We've talked about bringing up transitional housing because it's such an important piece. My lens is PSH isn't working for us as well as it could be. And so for me, there's potential reduction there. Similar.
Do you mean HCMS PSH or our 2 site-based?
2 site-based PSH, Viewfinder and Heartwood Commons, and happy to give you more information about that.
Reduce the capacity?
Something's got to be figured out.
Okay, noted.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say that I agree with that last.
Heartwood and Viewfinder? Okay, well,
Yeah.
let's talk
Yeah.
offline, because I would say, and I'm sorry, I don't wanna, but that generally, we're looking at maintaining our capital investments, and those are 2 places where we've made.
Right,
So
correct.
if something's not working there.
Right.
It might be that actually we have to increase funding or find a new provider.
Yeah.
Or
Something.
so it's
Yes.
good to get feedback, but I'm curious to know how that feedback relates to the budget, because you don't take 2 PSH units offline, you
Right.
either like stop funding Heartwood and sell it back to the market, which I don't think anybody's entertaining.
Mhm.
So, okay, we'll
Yeah.
have to take up that
Yes.
feedback later.
But totally, and you said this word too, we were living in a place of abundance and it was easy. I said to my board recently, we were in bliss is what we were in. But this is causing some really good conversations. System support, I was really thankful to see that, with some funding in it, because I have a slide from the December 10th Board of County Commissioners meeting where that line item was brought down to $500,000. And so for me, that caused a scare. I didn't understand it reading last night about the data quality piece, but you explained it today and I do have a better understanding about that. And I would agree, you know, when I look at the system at large, we have a few agencies that have many programs that they're running under their contracts, and then a few with only a couple. And so how do we maybe equitably do data quality better? So that seems like a reasonable reduction. And then I think that yeah, you guys are gonna have to take some hits too. And so the level of difficulty is also on your plate, as it is ours, and there's just an appreciation for that. My last piece is, this is just an advocacy piece for me. Under one of the things you heard, I'm not gonna find it as fast as I want to. I would advocate for not much of a reduction to that outreach and access. Those are key points in our system. And as we are thinking about reductions and thinking about not being able to move people into housing or having to do slow roll on that, those are gonna become even more important. And so I just wanted to highlight that. And then to answer your questions, I think a lot of this is within our guiding principles. We've shared our concerns, and I think you guys are being really intentional about mitigation of these reductions. So I just really appreciate this conversation and the depth of it. And we know it's not hard, or it's not, we know it's very hard, not easy at all. And I will say I received an email yesterday, again, just a point for everyone. The HRSN, the Medicaid piece is open again. So they're doing capacity building stuff. So if you are interested in being able to utilize Medicaid to offset some of your services, now is the time to get on that.
Vernon has a question. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry, Vernon. Vernon, please.
Thank you. A couple of things. I just wanted to piggyback on a couple of things you had mentioned, Kim, about the about the outreach and access. First and foremost, I think that's really important to understand. And then secondly, and regarding the transitional housing piece, I just I would for clarification, were there some changes made in terms of how the types of projects that were going to be accepted or rolled out? Because I've been hearing some information that was a lot different than what we heard earlier on. So just wanted some clarification around that. And then the last thing, I think as it relates to the inclement weather budgets and how that's rolled out, I think with less impact to the day rates, then I think that would make it a lot easier to look at the inclement weather funding a lot differently, because I think we can make that work with far less impact on inclement weather and just having the support and just the regular day rate, because you know you're going to be open, and those kinds of things. So I just think that's something to be strongly considered as well.
Vernon, may I ask for clarification? Are you suggesting we might have further savings in inclement weather because we're going to have access centers?
Well, no, what I'm saying is that because the access centers, well, for us, we would be able to having the day rate maintained as closely to what it is. It would be much easier for us than to have a substantial reduction in our day rate and maintaining the inclement weather, the number of days, and even the amounts that's there for each particular day that we're open, because of the just the consistency of the regular day rate and being able to with having that consistency, then you can plan more thoroughly for us anyway, for inclement weather and what that looks like and how we're going to cover that staffing and the operations and all that.
I think I understand. Thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, and then there was another question about transitional housing. I think what I don't know if I'm able to say more, Vernon, and I know what you're referencing, and I think there's some executive privileged information that our board is considering, which I would be happy to bring back to this table when I can share more about that. But at this time, the board has approved the 2 transitional housing projects, and staff remain enthusiastic in supporting the work of those future transitional housing programs. So I think that's all I can say at this time.
All righty.
So Zoe, please go ahead.
A comment and an advocacy. Based on the principle of balanced systems, so we prepare our participants from shelter to housing, and concern about the reduction of the housing liaison, especially the family and the youth shelters housing liaisons, and taking consideration, like, my wonder is, what are we using to prove the success? The utilization of funding should not, because there's a lot more going into the work of the liaisons doing with a family with children in our shelters and our family shelters and the youth. Prepare them for housing, making the, look into barriers and trying our best to mitigate those barriers and utilize the support and the funding out there to pay for an eviction that they have under records, or a debt that they have, or pulling out their credit report to see where are going to be the barriers in case they happens to end up in a housing program. So the conversations, the tenant education happening, the budgeting conversation happening, and in reality, it's like you're gonna move and you're gonna have to pay this, et cetera, is not part of what this team is using. So that you're not gonna see the success of this by the amount of money that they are utilizing. But again, those checkings that they're having to them, or perhaps the result of families moving out to a permanent housing and not moving back to homelessness. And I'm a little concerned about a reduction if that's going to happen, because sometimes families move to shelter and they're on their own until that shelter date end, or they have to move. So to me, it's a very important position to have.
Thank you, Zoe. I'm gonna just take this opportunity to lift up agreement and also eagerness for our system to evolve even further, the success, the sort of emerging success of the liaisons work. It is so critical, and I think it's still not fully there as a system or as an idea, as a concept. My sense is the liaisons have been really tied to sort of like specific funding tools and specific intervention types. But now as we move our system into attrition, those liaisons are the housing workers of our system who are gonna understand who needs what kind of service and what kind of service is even available to help them. They're gonna need to understand Medicaid, they're gonna need to understand everything. So in some ways, I think these are the workers that we need to most invest in and most empower, and like they are gonna be the I hope they become the most sort of like coveted roles in our system, the experts over, thank you, Kim. And I just don't think we're there yet because we haven't, it's still new staff, it's our side is new staff, your side is new staff. So please know reductions there are not at all coming from a place of wavering commitment to the vision of the liaisons. And in fact, I think this speaks to some things that Vernon was saying earlier too. When we bring on the access centers, that's another place where we need those experts to be able to direct people to where they're gonna get housing help in our system. So that's frankly why we think they need a bigger budget. They might not be using that budget now, but our future vision is that these are the workers who are going to be doing some of the things that Zoe is describing and need those resources to solve the problems that are going to ultimately get folks housed. So the reductions we're envisioning are more about are we correctly distributing those experts across our system in the most strategic places? And right now we think there might be some places where we need them less, or we have more liaisons in one place than we do in another place. And so just sort of standardizing where those experts in our systems are, because they are so critical. So thank you for that feedback. And I just wanted to say, we agree. And we think we have work to do to get to that liaison vision in our future.
Right, so that was my point, is I think that for next year, we could reduce those flex funds because we're not there. But yes, you're right, that is where we're going, and we as an agency are trying to move in that direction and trying to get our housing liaisons to become those experts and get engaged. You know, there's just been a shift, specifically with housing liaisons, there's a shift in the system. You know, I used to be able to go to Hisson once a month in a room with 50 other providers and just pull a ton of them, you know, get a lot, and the meeting might have been an hour, but we were there for many hours just talking to each other and gaining information and stuff. And that's changed, you know, after COVID. And so just getting folks that are new to the work up to that level of expert is just gonna take some time and energy. But it is what we're working towards. So it was more just a next year budget. There could be a reduction because they're not gonna be up to par yet. I wanna check in if anybody has any other feedback for this specific conversations before we move on in our agenda.
And I might offer, Chair, for the new folks in the room and in the room virtually, this is a lot of content to dive right into. We haven't had our orientation conversation. If there are questions that come up, please reach out to Nadia or myself. We're happy to be a resource as you're diving into a lot of new content.
Okay, next on our agenda is staff updates. We're gonna ask BNF with Hack to go first, and then Nicole will be our second one. So BNF, please.
Yes. Happy to share some updates. We have our first meeting of the year next week. And we are also bringing some of the SHS conversation to that group, knowing that there's been a lot of updates recently. So we'll have those updates happening there. We are also doing some real estate activity updates there. We are part of the Permanent Supportive Housing Institute. And we've been working on a project with that, so they'll have an update there as well. And yeah, just kind of getting the year started with that. I wanted to say again, thanks everyone who showed up at the luncheon. I know I had seen y'all there. And yeah, we're also doing bylaws updates as well, so that's going to be something we are focusing on because that's really important to mirror what Solutions Council is doing as well. So yeah, not much there, just chugging along.
Thank you, BNF.
Y'all are doing a lot of work, so I appreciate all the conversations that y'all been having, so hopefully we can share that with the group as well.
Nicole.
Great, well, I have a few updates, and Jess, I don't know if you want to give the leadership hiring updates, if you'd like me to.
Oh, can I?
Yes.
Yeah, I had hard news. I'd like to take some good news.
Yes, go for it.
We have two wonderful new colleagues who are going to join the Homeless Services Division. It's been a hard go, first letting go of Catherine and Allie, who were our partners in the Homeless Services Division leadership and transitioned at the end of October, I think, and early November. The staff has really been having to lean in, pitch in, learn more about their jobs, help me understand, so it's been an all hands on deck few months and we're pretty tired, but we've learned a lot and we're much stronger for it. And now we get to welcome two wonderful new people to the team. So on February 17th, Tim Ellsworth will be joining the division. He'll be moving to our team from County Corrections, where he has been for about 7 years, and previous to that he worked for the Sheriff's Department. He's been with the county for a long time, so he's going to be like our resident county expert, which is really helpful in a business operations manager, understanding procurement, understanding budget planning, spend down management. So we're really excited for the expertise he brings, and he's really excited to join this mission driven work in homeless services. He's already been a great partner because we already work corrections and housing already work in alignment and partnership. So we have a monthly meeting with him and his team. So we feel like really lucky to have scooped him and brought him over to the Homeless Services Division. And then Katie Gentry will be joining us from the Maricopa County Continuum of Care Homeless Services System in Arizona. She brings a plethora of homeless services system experience, having worked sort of like on mayor-driven initiatives in the mayor's office all the way to COC program oversight. And so has that breadth and depth. She's done Medicaid billing and homeless services. That's something that Arizona is actually really good at. Sometimes how scarcity drives creativity. We haven't had the scarcity to drive that. We're going to start experiencing that, and Katie's going to bring some of that expertise to help us start figuring things out, like leveraging Medicaid. So she will start March 3rd. She has to sell a house and move cross country, but she's so excited because she grew up here in Tigard, and she's so proud to come back to her home community. So I look forward to introducing both of them to you here in future meetings, but also, across the community. You're going to get to know both Katie and Tim because they're going to be so critical to the continuation of this good work. Yay.
And I'll round us out with the last bit of staff updates. Carly, and I'm forgetting her last name, I should have looked it up, with our government relations team was planning on joining. She's out sick today, so I'll give just a brief overview of the legislative session that starts next week, and a preview, and maybe a bit of a preview of what she'll bring forward. So the state legislative session begins, as I mentioned, next week on Tuesday. This is the long session. There's the short session in the even numbered years and the long session in the odd numbered years. So the session's 165 days, and at the end of that, we'll understand what housing resources there are, but we have some good indicators now, and one of those being what Jess mentioned. The governor's recommended budget is a huge indicator for where the legislature might invest. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I do want to pull out some high level things, because y'all know I worked doing legislative work for the state in housing for a long time. So this is exciting news to be able to share, and just not normal in terms of what our state has done in the past, and is what I hope is the new norm for what we see for state investments in housing. The governor's recommended budget includes over $1 billion in investment in housing, with $218 million about to support shelter operations across the state. Which is again incredible. Prior to this, it was kind of pennies before the executive order, so this is really great to see this level of investment. We're seeing her recommend to extend housing assistance and rental assistance resources for folks that were rehoused through the executive order. So that would bring money directly to Washington County, and as some of those state resources we're seeking to help fill that budget hole. And that is around $300 million in continuing and keeping folks housed that were housed during the executive order. We're also seeing an incredible investment proposal of $173 million for eviction prevention in the governor's recommended budget. This is really exciting. She has other kind of smaller investments to focus on partnerships with tribal governments and housing opportunities for folks that live in tribal communities. She's also expanding her permanent supportive housing. She'd like to add 400 slots of permanent supportive housing statewide. As BNF mentioned, we are part of the Permanent Supportive Housing Institute. We should be some of those slots. Some of those should be coming to Washington Washington County, through our partnership with the Housing Authority of Washington County, that of course lives with us. There's also down payment assistance resources for folks in manufactured home parks, foreclosure assistance, and quite a bit of resources for development. So around $17 million for home ownership development, $880 million for permanent supportive housing and other affordable housing investments, which is incredible. And we're also seeing $185 million to preserve existing affordable housing. So we know, folks remember Wood Springs. This is just really great investments to help across the housing continuum. So we're really excited about the governor's recommended budget, and we'll be cheerleading that on in Salem with our government relations team. And we'll also be tracking some policy moves. So we know, I've seen at least 25 bills so far for this legislative session. There's a lot moving. There's bills that might fund furniture services for our partner at Community Warehouse. There's some bills about hold deposits and what that might look like for tenants. So providing more tenant protections on what hold deposits are. Additional tenant protections for rental applications are being proposed. A proposed rental registry is on the docket this year. So there's a lot of movement happening, and we want to make as much space as possible for our government relations team to come give you that information, and would love to work with your executive committee to see what would be the right ways for you all to engage, and advocacy is going to be needed, and we'd love for your support in that advocacy.
Does what you're looking at identify like a proposed investment for youth homelessness?
The governor did not have a youth specific set aside in her budget. The Oregon, oh gosh, I'm gonna try, you might remember the Oregon Youth Alliance, is that the name of it? You remember, there is a group that focuses specifically on youth homelessness that is organized in Salem. They often have kind of a separate proposal that doesn't end up in a governor's recommended budget, but often ends up getting funded. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were some youth movement. What's important to note is youth homelessness work doesn't go through our traditional partner of Oregon Housing and Community Services. It goes through the Department of Human Services. So just an administrative note there.
The Youth Experiencing Homelessness Program, the YEP program, is that what you're describing?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I know time, place, manner is.
Yes, yeah, there's conversations about changes to time, place, manner. I haven't seen anything in writing, but I know the League of Oregon Cities is working on a proposal.
So question, just because my brain's not remembering, with that huge of an investment to affordable housing, how does that change our conversation with Metro?
I think that's a great point, Chair. One thing I'll uplift, the LIFT program, the Local Innovation Fast Track program, is the primary mechanism the state invests in affordable housing. That was established actually 10 years ago. I just realized it's 10 years ago, it was established 10 years ago, and it was originally established with $50 million. So we have seen a really dramatic increase in the state's investments in developing housing in the last 10 years. And I will give Governor Kotek all the kudos and credit. It was her time as speaker where she pushed that program through. And of course, as governor, has been investing really heavily in it.
Okay, great, thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? I'm looking online and in the room.
May I?
Please.
Sorry, I had a lot of time, but your questions sparked some really good news, a reminder to share some good news that our staff, if you've met Heather Scriber, she's the data genius in our team. She shared with us where we're at in addressing chronic homelessness, and that did she say a 30% reduction from when we began here in Washington County? But profoundly, we have almost reached functional zero in youth and family chronic homelessness. There were only 3 youth and 5 families or something like that on the list right now in our system. So functional zero, two youth and 5 families. Functional zero is when someone is chronically homeless and they come to us and we can immediately move them into housing. And we're there with youth and we're there with family. We're not yet there with all people experiencing chronic homelessness. That 1,750 households in housing right now with our programs is representative of that tremendous game-changing work we've done here. So I'm sorry.
I was looking for a button to like party, but there is no button. Like, where? Oh, this is Zoom. I cannot heart it.
We're gonna send it around and you can heart it in the emails.
If there's a reaction button, it's still.
Right, yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a perfect way to end.
All right.
Perfect way to end. Okay, well then we will adjourn this meeting and see you all very soon.
An hour or a minute early.
You know, through-
2 minutes, that's a rarity for us.
Yeah, did it.